Meet Berries, the AI-powered scribe that writes your therapy notes for you. Secure and private with no recording stored and EMR ready with one click. Join over 8,000 clinicians, saving time and staying present in sessions. And right now, save $50 off your first month with code TherapyShow50. Berries, so you can focus on care, not notes.
Welcome to the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard, where continuing education meets convenience. Lisa brings therapists practical conversations with expert guests who share tools, techniques, and insights to enrich your practice. Whether you're on a walk, commuting, or cooking dinner, you can earn continuing education contact hours and stay inspired without sitting through endless recorded trainings. Visit lisamustard.com to join CE membership and keep your professional growth as seamless as your favorite podcast.
Well, hey friends, welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and today's guest is Dr. Chloe Carmichael. Welcome to the podcast. It is so awesome to have you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's really awesome to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I know that I shared with you earlier that I have been following you for a little bit. I pre-ordered your book and then it hopefully will be here when it releases in November. But I'm so excited to share with my audience. Could you just give us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you help? And I know that can go in different directions, but I wanted to hear from you in your own words.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm a USA Today bestselling author. So for your listening audience, behind me, I have some books that I've written and they've been translated into multiple languages, which is exciting. That book behind me is about the healthy function of anxiety, which is to stimulate preparation behaviors. As a psychologist working with high functioning people, I found that they were really interested in that topic. However, back in COVID, I did like a little bit of a career path switch. And basically, I got really uncomfortable with some of the stuff going on about COVID and what you could say and you couldn't say. And then I had kind of a breaking point and decided I just had to speak my mind. And after doing that, I noticed that my own cognitive processes were sharper and that I was more in touch with my emotions. And then all of our education and training as, mental health professionals hit me where I was like, oh yeah, suppression, repression, denial, authenticity, relationships. And so I then got very interested in the mental health benefits of free speech. So taking then to our current moment, to the book that you very nicely pre-order, which I really appreciate because that sends a signal to the publishers. So the book is called Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. And I'm super excited and passionate about that topic.
Yeah, I know just by connecting with you and listening to the information that you've put out there, you've actually inspired me to be a little more brave. And I know I shared with you that a few weeks back, about a month and a half, a little bit over a month ago, I had an experience with a loved one where the conversation turned political and it didn't go the way that I had hoped it would in terms of us understanding each other. However, I was able to say what I believed and it was really freeing that I actually was able to say what I believe to be true based on the information that I have and the work that I do. And the person receiving this information was just not in a place that they wanted to hear it. But I walked away from it really shaken up. What is the word? Really shook up. And I called my husband and I was talking to him about it. But I realized that there was something here happening for me. I was able to speak my truth. And it was actually so freeing at the same time. I was a little worried about our relationship, but I was also like, wow, that felt so good to actually get it out. So what is that all about? Like, what is that? What did I experience? I mean, I'm guessing there's some type of cycle maybe that of anxiety or avoidance that I
Yeah.
was going through.
Well, I mean, it's catharsis,
Mhm.
right? To go back to the psychoanalytic term of expressing something and getting it out, that there's just kind of a feeling of like, all right, I said that. I put it into words. And again, as people in the mental health field, that's like a huge part of what we do is guiding people to take their internal life and put it into words. I think that when people do say things that they've been holding up, pent up inside for a long time, I know this was true for me, it can come out in fits and starts at first. And it can almost come across with more of an edge than we intended. Again, just like when we're working with anger management clients, one of the things that many psychologists try to guide them to do is to actually express themselves at lower levels of frustration. Anger management clients often, like they've had so many experiences of having an angry outburst that they're like, well, what I'll do is I'll just hold it all in and I'll never, ever have an outburst. And, it's like the opposite of what they need to do. They need to learn how to express it, at lower levels. And so I don't know, again, I wasn't there. I'm sure you expressed yourself in a lovely manner, but, from what you told me, it got a little intense and that might have just had to do with the other person. But I know that for me, when I had held things in for a long time, and then I first started really saying what I thought about topics that mattered to me, I had a little bit of an edge. And then the more I just started talking about it, the more I could be at peace with the fact that, like, yep, this is what I think, and that's what you think, and it's okay that we disagree. So, to answer your question, what happened there, my guess is that, you just opened up in a way you hadn't, and there might have even been a little extra fire because you'd been holding it under, like, like a volcano that just kind of
Yeah.
at a certain point says, I got to let this out.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that, being that this was a loved one, a family member, there was old wounds that were being touched upon. There were people also in the room, unspoken alliances. So there was a lot of things happening in the room. And I was angry at myself that I couldn't in the moment recognize it, but at the same time, learn from that experience of how to handle myself the next time and being able to explain myself a little more calmly and rationally and understanding also where that person's coming from. So you're right, there was that edge. And I think we have to accept that that's gonna happen, but as long as we're interested in learning from it, I think there's so much room for growth. So that's at least my takeaway.
Yeah, I would say that too. You know, as before I was a clinical psychologist, I was a yoga teacher. And I know even within psychology, there's a lot of exploration and use of mindfulness, which obviously as a yoga teacher, we went really deep into that. One of the key things with mindfulness that we do is we observe our thought process and then we put it into words. It's really an important piece of it, whether it's through journaling or telling another person about it. And it's through that telling another person or writing it down, putting it into language, that is how we build awareness and how we start to not only build awareness of what we're seeing, but how we feel about it. And as you said, starting to notice and evaluate all the other factors in the room that came into play. So, what also happened there, I'm sure, is that your own mindfulness, not only of what you thought, but your exquisite awareness of all the various other
Mm.
factors that went into communicating it, that you built your mindful awareness of all those things.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Let's just hope the next time that a situation arises, I can tap into that. I think that's, gonna be my work. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind your book, like an open dialogue. What does the research say about how authentic self-expression supports mental health?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many parts, but just, as we discussed, even simply with mindfulness, which
Mhm.
we know a lot of psychologists and mental health professionals are interested in that and learning to put things into language. But another, for example, is that when we name our emotions, it has been shown to reduce amygdala activity. And I'm sure your audience knows this, but just as a quick refresher, the amygdala is the part of the brain that becomes active when we feel fearful. And so when we can name our feelings, and so like I'll just, be bold, for example, and say, like, when I think about a boy playing on the girls' soccer team, I feel angry. And so when I name that emotion, it actually starts to decrease my amygdala activity. Because as we all know, the other side of anger is fear. And when we stop people from saying how they feel, we're actually creating more of that powder keg explosive moment where I think we're actually more prone. I mean, thankfully, I've never had a problem of being violent in my life. But, there's other ways that anger can be problematic. And as we all know, if we're working with somebody that has a problem with anger or, heaven forbid, with violence, the first thing we want to do is increase their emotional vocabulary. We want to increase their self expression vocabulary. And so, to answer your question, the science and the mental health then around freedom of expression and freedom of speech and people saying what they really think is that it's going to improve relationships. It's going to allow people actually to interact more peacefully, which is where I get frustrated as a psychologist when I hear people saying, well, we have to shut down speech because of hate speech and bullying. And
Right.
I'm like, ironically, I
Mhm.
think we're going to have more problems with more intense hateful conduct and with more actual bullying if we prevent people from solving, resolving, and or even just being at peace with the fact that they disagree through words. That's where we want people to go, is into words, not away from it.
Right, because we don't want them to then go into the actual violence of the moment of those feelings. So,
Or passive
yeah,
aggression.
yeah.
So, like, if you, I mean, again, thankfully, I'm not a violent person,
Mhm.
but if I can't express myself for whatever reason, it has been shown that if people don't feel that they can discuss and address their problems directly, they resort to passive aggression as
Mm.
well. So maybe instead of having an out and frank discussion with people, I start kind of shutting down and I'm, kind of excluding people and being aloof and being isolating or gossiping or making snide remarks or whatever. And it's so much healthier if we can just say what's actually going on, right? And figure it out together.
Yeah, I see a lot of passive aggressiveness in my circle at times around the real issue, and I just want I wanna address it, but I also am like, "Do I want to then get into it with this person? Is it worth it?" So I have to decide, like, the relationship, is it worth it to me, I guess?
Well, that's an
Mhm,
interesting point as well. So I think that the topic of boundaries comes
mhm.
into play. That's another thing I discuss in the book. If we can understand that we don't want to be stuck in self-censorship, which is where we're, kind of really muzzling ourselves all the time about things that matter, versus what I call healthy self-restraint, right? Just having a filter. We don't need to say everything to
Yeah,
everybody at all times. And there's a lot of room in the middle. And there's also room to be able to simply acknowledge to someone that you have a difference of opinion without feeling that it has to turn into a knockdown, drag out debate either, right?
right.
We can agree to disagree is a phrase that I think American life has sort of forgotten. We've been taught that it's impolite to discuss politics to the point where we don't know how to discuss politics politely.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I am a Gen X generation, and I grew up with we just don't talk about politics and religion. We just don't, and we didn't. In the '80s and the '90s, it would perk up every now and then, but it was like we just respectfully would kind of just okay, that's what you think and that's what you believe. But nowadays, it is just so heated. And what are your thoughts on that? Like where we are now, and especially as therapists, what do you have any ideas or suggestions around that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's so much about where we are now. And, as you said, especially as therapists, because it's kind of an adjacent topic here that the therapy industry itself is extremely politically, ideologically skewed.
Right.
And that's not just my opinion, it's a fact. These are numbers, even just according to like official organizations within the psychology world. It's literally like 90% liberal identifying,
Mhm.
90% plus, and that's the faculty as well as the actual therapists. And so it's really hard for, clients that are not of that particular political persuasion to see a therapist and to not be pathologized. I mean, there was a therapist, her name is, I think, Pamela somebody. She
Oh,
just
yeah. Jaeger.
shared like a,
Pam
yeah,
Jaeger.
she just shared a video that she took where she was at some kind of a
Mm.
continuing education training and they were literally talking about, clients that voted for Trump and how to deprogram them and how they are hateful. And I mean, there's this group think that happens when and it would happen with conservatives too. Whenever you have any group of people that's completely homogenous, who also regard themselves as experts, that don't have any real challenge on what they're saying, again, to answer your question, where are we as a field? We are literally, we've gone left to the point where it's become, I think, irrational and
Yeah.
alienating. And, ironically, for a field that in many ways celebrates diversity, is so blind to the fact that there's not only no ideological diversity, there's actually a hostility towards political and ideological diversity in our field. And it bleeds over and it hurts the clients, I think.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. And for those who don't know, Pam Yeager attended a training and it was called something like how to like Trump people who voted for Trump are in a cult and how to recognize it and then how to I don't even know what it was, but if you watch the videos that she shared over on X, all of it was just pure propaganda. There was no fact. They were just giving their opinions. it was really wild, and it counted for continuing education, which blew my mind because I am a continuing education provider, and I was like, "They clearly violated a policy, clearly violate." Anyway, that's a whole other podcast, but thanks for bringing that up because it is important, and I see it happening within our field, and I don't know what the answer is to bring people back together. This whole agree to disagree, I think, is important, and it also might be that there's a minority of people that are the vocal minority are just so loud that they take over on social media, and that's what the algorithm, if you click on it, that's what you see. So I'm not quite sure, how many therapists out there are actually act like that or think like that. But there is a trend now, it seems like, where clients want to know what the political belief system is of the therapist before they even make an appointment with them. And as a therapist, I don't believe that, I don't believe therapy is political. So, and I don't believe that it's helpful to, share my political beliefs. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in a normal situation, I would agree with what you're saying.
Mhm.
But again, when we also, okay, like therapy is not political, but what about, again, if there's a very good chance that your therapist might have just watched a video about how people that voted like more than half the country did are in a cult. And again, 90% of therapists do identify as liberal. So even if they're not, out there, creating vicious content, they're just through no fault of their own, I'm sorry for lack of a better word, but bumbling along, mindlessly, as we all do. The brain likes to have efficiency. We don't evaluate every single thing every time we see it because, we're moving along. And so they're just like, oh, yeah, this was an available continuing education credit. I assume that these experts know what they're talking about. Oh, yeah, I didn't vote for Trump. I have kind of always had, oh, and so, yeah, I guess they're all in a cult. And so, yeah, I do think that the American public is rightly starting to ask itself. Moreover, when our own field is going around telling parents, well, if your kid identifies as trans, then you should immediately start affirming them. And if you don't, then would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? And so much non-science, so much ridiculous science. And we can say that therapy is not political, but all of this nonsense is attached to one particular side of the aisle, and that belief system is attached to our field. We could go on and on. COVID, right? People wearing masks. If you had clients that didn't want to wear masks or, didn't want to do 6 feet apart or, whatever. I knew therapists that were totally pathologizing those clients. So again, I think in a normal situation, it would be odd for a client to start asking about their therapist's political identification. But unfortunately, I think our field has beclowned itself
Yeah.
to the point where I think it's actually a fair question for clients to say, well, where are you politically? Because I want to know if you're going to pathologize me because
Yeah.
I'm wearing a cross around my neck,
Sure.
you know?
Sure. Yes. No, and I can get on board with that. I can understand that for sure. Yeah, definitely. I think it's just, therapists out there are wondering, do I wh- ma- what do they do in a situation like that? Do they let them know? Is that going to come back to hurt them, or do they try to stay as neutral as possible? And is that's up to, I guess, the therapist. But I hear what you're saying. It's just it's hard to know, what's best for your practice and for your livelihood, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I personally think it's good to be truthful. I hate to always be like the putting it back on the client type question, but I do think it's also fair to ask the client, like, what's driving your question?
Sure.
But I mean, I'll just say again, like yet another example of this where I've seen it affecting clients in real life to the point where I can understand why they're asking this. I was asked to speak for Families Advocating for Campus Equality, which is an organization that helps young men that are falsely accused of sexual misconduct. I met with 12 young college men that had been, as I don't know if it's legal anymore, but at the time, they were able to just get legally, immediately kicked out of their university without even so much as a police report having been filed because some little kangaroo court of professors decided to believe a claim that this person had committed sexual misconduct. These young men were meeting with me to tell me that they had tried to even just simply go to therapists to talk about the trauma of having been falsely sexually accused. And every single one of them said that the therapist insisted to them and kept asking them, well, are you sure you didn't do it? Maybe you're toxically masculine and you didn't understand and blah, 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 blah. I wrote into the Division 42 listserv, which is the APA's listserv for clinical psychologists in private practice. Maybe it's open to other mental professionals as well. And in preparation, even just for going to speak at this event, FACE had asked me not to publicize I was speaking there because they get so many like problems of people trying to destroy their events. So I didn't even mention where I was speaking. I just said, I'm looking for scholarly references or experiences about therapists that have worked with clients falsely accused of sexual misconduct. Within minutes of me making this post, multiple people had written in somehow obtaining a flyer to the event, sharing the flyer, saying, this is what Dr. Carmichael is really going to speak about. I suggest none of us help her with this, this hateful thing that she's trying to do. And then after I spoke, I followed up with a listserv again and normally, like when you say that you have referrals, like I would get peppered with people that wanted to see the referrals. But in this case, I said, yeah, there's like this organization really needs like a list of therapists that would be happy to help young men falsely accused. Crickets. I didn't get one single taker. So again, I just think it's very, very, very fair for clients in this day and age to want to know, hey, if I'm coming to see you because my son is trying to say he's a girl and I want support as I go through that journey, are you going to pathologize me? Or, I was falsely accused of, sexual misconduct. Are you going to pathologize me? Or, my daughter stopped speaking to me because I voted for Trump and I want support with that. Are you going to actually try to turn this into a deprogram me session? I hate to say it, but I think that these are fair and valid questions in this day and age.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm nodding my head and I agree with you for sure.
There's a new way for counselors to complete their continuing education contact hours, and it doesn't involve staring at slides. Lisa has created Pod Courses, the perfect mix of podcast convenience and professional development. You'll find engaging topics like OCD treatment, burnout and self-care, first responder support, holistic approaches, and more. Listen while you drive, exercise, or even do chores. After a short quiz, you'll get your certificate of completion. It's that simple. Explore the full library today at lisamustard.com/podcourses or click the link in the show notes. These courses are proudly offered by Mustard Consulting LLC, an NBCC ACEP provider.
So for therapists out there that are wondering how do they use their voice and they are curious to learn more about what your book can do for them, what would be some things because I'm excited to read your book. I can't wait to have it in my hands because I'm ready to own my voice. I'm ready to put myself out there just a little bit more. I want to be able to say what I'm thinking and my beliefs and have the confidence and courage to do that. So what would you recommend to therapists? Like, what will this book help them with?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm really glad that you're interested in doing that. And, even from the livelihood standpoint, if therapists are thinking of coming out of the closet as even just being politically independent, I think that that's a beautiful thing to say. And I think that 90% of our profession has alienated more than half of the country as client bases. So even just from a purely business standpoint, I think
Yeah.
could be a great business move if you're just trying to service a large swath of people that are unable to find help right now.
Right, because
Yeah.
51% of our country did vote for Trump. And therapists forget that they're excluding a huge population of potential clients. I mean, that as a business model, that blows my mind. Sorry, I just had to say that because I just
No,
don't.
you're so correct. I mean, so simple ways, that therapists could do that, I think, to start signaling that. I mean, I've always said, because I have another service of video downloads that help therapists to build their own successful private practice and all that kind of stuff. And I've always encouraged therapists to blog. So, I would check in with ChatGPT and say, like, can you give me some good titles? I'm looking to write some blogs that will signal to the public that I am politically neutral, right? So,
Yeah.
because I think many of us are like
Mhm.
I don't have anything against liberals. I don't have anything against conservatives. I just want us to be people. So, even something like a blog about learning how to navigate in politically intense times and learning how to speak freely. The mental health benefits of free speech certainly are important to me. So, blogging about some of those topics, I think could be helpful. Maybe role playing with some other therapists as far as some of those tricky question and answer situations that you think might come up. I'm a big fan of the word politically independent because what I think that signals to people is whether you're liberal or whether you're conservative, it's okay with me. I'm in the center.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's a really good way of presenting yourself. And then that lets the client decide how they're gonna view that, how they're gonna take that in and how comfortable they are. And it puts it on them because you've stated your belief and it's out there, I guess, at that point. So where can people find your book if they would like to order it?
Yeah, I made a super easy website because I know that Dr. Chloe has all kinds of questions about how exactly to spell that. So they can go to freespeechtoday.com, freespeechtoday.com.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I would just let them know that I'm excited to hear from people and I'm, creating some materials for book clubs and I know you and I are going to talk again and do something for your community. So my whole thing is speech and connection and being authentic and noticing that we're in an epidemic of loneliness. And that's something I think therapists are noticing their clients are dealing with too. It's isolating to not be yourself and to be authentic. So even if they want to write blogs about 10 good reasons to express yourself or why it's good to listen to others, even if you disagree without shutting them down. I want to see therapists doing that with their clients, but I also want to be doing that myself. So if people like what I'm saying, by all means, go to that website, freespeechtoday.com, and you can follow me on all the social media channels and interact with me there. But even if you disagree with me, I encourage you to do the same thing because I mean it when I say I'm about open dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Chloe. This has been such a great episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please note that the content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional mental health care, diagnose, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own licensed mental health provider or medical professional regarding your specific situation. While I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and my guests are also professional counselors, the discussions in this podcast are meant to offer general insights and should not be taken as personalized therapeutic advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a therapist-client relationship with me or any of my guests. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or have thoughts of harming yourself or others, please contact a mental health professional, call 911, or go to the nearest emergency room immediately. You can also reach out to a crisis hotline such as the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 in the United States for immediate support. Every individual's journey is unique, and what works for one person may not be suitable for another, so please use discretion and seek appropriate care as needed. Please note that the therapy show with Lisa Mustard is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your therapist, doctor, or physician before implementing any suggestions from the show. The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard is edited and engineered by Chelsea Weaver. If you're looking to start a podcast or ready to take the editing off of your plate, be sure to visit chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover all the pod courses and other continuing education offerings. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.